Okay, I think everyone's in now. So without further ado, thank you for spending your Wet Tuesday lunch hour with us. This is an event that we've put on to help with sort of induction for new councillors about what London councils and especially Transport and Environment Committee are doing around the response to the climate emergency. My name's Phil Glanville and I have many hats in this space in local government for the purposes of this meeting, Mayor of Hackney and lead member and chair of Transport and Environment Committee. It's where most of the collaborative work around London Council's response to climate emergency takes place, but it also has that close link into transport as well, and is a formal part of London Councils, and actually I think predates London Councils. It's cross-party. And it's very much inner and outer London, so 32 London boroughs in the city, and it works to a shared agenda that it develops, but also the Leaders Committee of London Councils. There is a rep from every borough and the city on Transport and Environment Committee, and we work very much in a collaborative way, and there are vice chairs from all of the different political parties and groupings on London Councils that are represented at that level. We've been working together around a shared endeavour around climate change since 2019, and we sit atop a political structure and work very much with lead officers in their professional disciplines as well, and as well as the sort of convening power of how we work together to tackle climate change in our individual boroughs. We're also trying to influence policy at City Hall, at the LGA, at a government level, and advocate for change, but also showcase what we're doing here in London around tackling climate change. One of our key instruments, and you may have seen it go out last week, is our annual polling commissioned by London councils around a baseline about what Londoners think about climate change, and who should be responding to it and how they want to be involved. And we've been sort of tracking that all the way through COVID, and the very headline figure last week was 89% of Londoners surveyed are motivated to help prevent climate change, and that figure is high across all London boroughs, and I think the other critical bit is how people are starting to feel and connect the impact of climate change to issues like the cost of living crisis, where we've seen flooding and severe heat in recent years. Net zero and adaptation is part of the shared ambitions at London councils. These are the key priorities that the leaders have come together on a cross-party basis to set for London council's work. It's a bit analogous to the kind of manifesto corporate plan process that goes on in individual boroughs, but it happens at the London council's level. Going back to that 2019 moment, and it predates me as chair Transport and Environment Committee, LEDNet, which is the local environment directors network, and Transport and Environment Committee came together to discuss climate change issues facing boroughs and how we could work together to address them. And that was a year, if we go back to 2019, where I think it's now 28 London boroughs have declared a climate emergency. And it was the response from the officer group and the Transport and Environment Committee to that challenge. What is the role for London councils in that? And we set it out in a joint statement on climate change. It also triggered 7 thematic programmes for cross-borough working, and colleagues are going to talk a bit more about that in the slide presentation. But we were really keen to give that sense of a whole London response, that London boroughs networked together could pull together solutions around those 7 thematic programmes and show that we could lead that from our existing resources and our existing boroughs. As I say, they'll be outlined in the presentation, and if you see your borough come up, please think about asking officers, lead member, whoever it might be at a local level, about what that programme looks like from a borough perspective and how you might want to be involved. We're also going to delve a little bit deeper into the views of Londoners on climate change and some of that public affairs work that I talked about at the start. I'm going to hand over to Zach and Katerina. There's a really amazing officer group here at London Councils. We've been investing in expanding that capacity since 2019 and really leading on that work. They're not the only people that are working on this, but I hope that if you're really passionate about how we're working together, you will see this as a sort of introduction and a lead off where you could think about how you could be more involved at a London Council's level and in individual boroughs. And I hope it will sit alongside the sort of discussions you've had around your own climate action plans in individual boroughs and what we're doing to take it forward. At the end, there'll be time for questions and Q&A with myself, Katerina and Zach. But without further ado, I will hand over to them to present our slide deck. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Glanville. And next slide, please, Emma. So climate change is defined by the UN as a change of climate which is attributed directly or indirectly to human activity that alters the composition of the global atmosphere and which is in addition to natural climate variability observed over comparable time periods. And that's incredibly, horribly technical. And I think the background of this slide does a much better job at showing what climate change is with these warming stripes, which show the long-term increase of average global temperatures. Obviously, blue being colder and hot being red being hotter. And in late 2018, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change issued a stark warning, stating that global warming could reach 1.5 degrees Celsius as soon as 2030 if we don't get greenhouse gas emissions down and if they continue to increase at their current rate. And this is a quote on the screen from the chair of the IPC saying that climate change is a grave and mounting threat to our well-being and to a healthy planet. And as Mayor Glanville outlined, climate change is something that Londoners know about and are worried about. As our polling showed, 94% of Londoners say they are aware of climate change, and 84% of Londoners say that they're concerned about climate change. And that concern is right across London in every sub-region, in every age group. Next slide, please, Emma. And as you've probably all heard before, global warming is likely to have devastating impacts on our planet's ecosystem and on our communities, including increased sea levels, species loss and extinction, increased rates of droughts in drier regions, with increased rates of wildfires, and also higher frequency and intensity of rainfall causing flash flooding. And we've seen that in London. This year we had a 40-degree heat wave. We've experienced flooding, which you can see on the screen here, which affected our infrastructure. And we recorded excess deaths during that heat wave of 2.8 thousand. So it's really having a big impact already on London. Next slide, please, Emma. And we found that on our polling too. So we found that 62% of Londoners said that their day-to-day life has been impacted already by the changing climate. And that's up from last year's polling, which we found only 55% of people have been impacted. So this impact is coming now and it's coming faster. And clearly climate change is a significant threat to London and Londoners, and we all need to act quickly and work together to reduce its severity and also to adapt to its impacts now and in the future. Next slide, please, Emma. And that's all very negative, and there aren't really positives to climate change, but we do know that investment in the action that gets us to net zero and in the action that adapts our city to the effects of climate change can help us reach some of our goals. So, for example, we know that retrofitting people's homes so that they're well insulated will drive down people's bills, and that's so important with the current cost of living crisis. We know that doing that and investing in green energy such as solar and wind improves the country's energy security. And we know that investing in walking and cycling, making it safer, more attractive, builds better places and helps ensure we have local neighbourhoods where people can live, play, study, train, work. And we know that all of this benefits the growth of good green jobs in industries such as retrofit as well. Next slide, please, Anna. And we've really seen that London boroughs have recognised that the climate emergency requires real changes in how we act as local authorities and how our residents live, your residents live, and how the city operates. And we know that local government has to be an essential partner in delivering the transition to net zero, thanks to our unique understanding of local context and the strong local relationships you as councillors have in your areas. And throughout 2019 and 2020, local authorities across the UK adopted climate emergency declarations, including the vast majority of London boroughs and the City of London. And in the wake of these declarations, councils have been preparing climate action plans to meet net zero targets. And as of earlier this year, 27 boroughs and the City of London had published climate action plans, most of those fully published, some of those still in draft form, and every other borough has a climate action plan in development. So all boroughs have published or will publish a climate action plan to take forward their work. And also London boroughs have adopted a variety of targets in respect of reducing both council generated emissions and borough-wide emissions. And these are the two graphs here. And we maintain a page on our website which is up to date with all borough targets, which we can circulate after this. And the majority of boroughs for your own emissions have adopted a target of net zero by 2030, which is also what the Mayor of London has adopted. One of the other ways that boroughs have come together to tackle climate change is with the programmes, and I'll hand over to my colleague Katerina to talk about those.
Thank you very much. Next slide, please. And Mayor Glanville already introduced the programmes and how they came about in 2019, when actually officers and councillors came together in a big event at the end of 2019, and then came together in a sort of joint, big, ambitious statement on climate change. Everybody was really keen and energized to do something about this this policy issue, and sort of developed the 7 strands, which are now developed into those 7 programmes. And the 7 programmes, because London Council has got a team of, we've got a team of 7 people in transport and environment, so quite a big portfolio to cover. So we knew we couldn't achieve the ambition that was set at that meeting alone. So we thought of the idea of having actually lead boroughs, and that's what we've ended up with, and it's worked really well so far. We've now got action plans that have all been published for each of the 7 programmes, and again they're on our website, which we'll send you the link to, and I'll talk a little bit about what some of those action plans contain in the next couple of slides. Next slide, please. So Retrofit London is actually now an award-winning programme. So we won the MJ Awards for Climate Leadership this year, and we are nominated for another award as well, which now escapes me, but I'll remember it soon. And the aim of this programme is very much to make all domestic buildings greener and warmer by getting them to an average level of EPC B or equivalent by 2013. So we're thinking long term, and we're looking at a whole system approach. So that is really all about, you know, home retrofitting involving fabric improvements, renewable energy generation, low carbon heat sources, all of those things that are essential for making London's homes greener, warmer, and more affordable also to live in. Zach mentioned the other benefits that will be addressed by addressing actually climate change. And we know that, you know, our current buildings that we have in London, 80% of them will continue to exist in the future. So at least 80% of them. So we need to make them more efficient and more environmentally friendly in a way. So and that's what the Housing Directors Network, we've got a number of professional networks that we're working with. Again, Mayor Glanville referred to the London Environment Directors Network, but the Housing Directors Network really grabbed this challenge and made it their own, which has been really, really helpful for all, I think, because they are the experts in this field. So they are talking about this in their meetings, they're meeting with their counterparts, their political counterparts. So it's been really helpful to see them grabbing this agenda and running with it. So the current plan sets out quite a lot of collaborative action that can be taken forward, along with further proposed metrics around overall carbon emissions, about space heating demand and energy use, and making sure that we reach that EPCB target in a way that also realizes some of those additional benefits in terms of addressing not just climate change, but also fuel poverty. Next slide, please. So low carbon development, again, very important to be addressing this. And it's about securing low carbon buildings and infrastructure via borough planning. again by 2030. So we're taking a long-term picture for all of these programs. And it's really important that we're not building in additional carbon when we're building new homes or new other buildings into the future. So that's why I think this is so important that we get this right, so we don't have to continue to retrofit in the future. So we're very ambitious again about low carbon development, and a lot of the boroughs are challenging themselves to go further and faster, because they understand that this will not only reduce emissions, but it also helps to create buildings that will then enable the occupants to live healthier and more sustainable lives, and also to cope better with the changing climate, because a certain amount of climate change is already baked into the system. So we have to think about how do we also adapt our buildings and our environment to some of the climate change. So and we're working together with industry on that. And another thing I wanted to mention actually at the beginning is we have got the lead boroughs, but they've all established working groups that have got a whole number of other boroughs involved in those. So I think we've now got all boroughs involved in some shape or form in the programs, which is a real achievement. And as Mayor Glenville said at the beginning, if you're interested, wanting to find out how your borough is involved currently, do speak to your officers or your cabinet members, or come to us and find out what's going on and how you could get involved. So be very, very glad to do that. Mayor Glenville, you're leading on this programme. Next slide, please. We've got another programme on low carbon transport, and that is about halving the road journeys made by petrol and diesel cars and encourage sustainable and active travel options. Now, and there's a critical role for local government to play on this, and especially in London, where 95% of the roads are in local government's hands, and you will all know about some of those active travel schemes that lay firmly within the boroughs rather than with TfL. So it's important. And the other reason this is so important is because the emissions in transport have been quite stagnant. Most other emissions have been going down for various different reasons, but on transport they are very what's the word, they don't move down very much. So it's important that we really start to tackle this, because they also are representing, I think it's the third highest emission factor for London. So it's a really big emissions, and it's something that's quite hard to address, but we need to crack it. So and there's a real opportunity here to make a difference through collaboration. So I think it's probably right for all of the programs. We can't do these on our own, which is what Mayor Glanville also said, and that's why we've set up in this way. We do need to collaborate. We need to collaborate amongst ourselves. We need to collaborate with other public sector organisations, the private sector, voluntary organisations, and also GLA and TfL are obvious partner in this as well. But the ambition for this programme is very much to become the centre of practice, data and expertise for London local government on transport decarbonisation, to become a convener of boroughs to help align and accelerate policy development, and to allow those net zero schemes to be delivered at scale. So that's really important that we scale up quickly as well. Next slide, please. Renewable Power for London is all about securing 100% renewable power for the public sector in London for now and in the future. So over the next 2 years, the programme will focus on the use of renewable power across the London public sector and households, and it's going to do that through developing a model for a collective power purchase agreement that can then be replicated by groups of boroughs. And it works with GLA and others to also review London's energy advice service to ensure it's reporting residents to access renewable power effectively. So So those are just some of the things that renewable power is looking at. But I think the power purchase agreement is really exciting, and it's a huge opportunity for London, particularly working with TfL as well, who is a huge user of energy. So there should be quite a lot of benefits be derived from that. So an exciting place to be in at the moment as well. And we've got Islington leading on that. Next slide, please. And this one, we're calling it the One World Living, which is all about consumption emissions. So the aim here is to reduce consumption emissions by 2/3, focusing on food, clothing, electronics, and aviation. So very much what it says here, our consumption is all the things that we all consume on a daily basis. It says here food, clothing, electronics, and aviation. And we've picked those four because they have the highest carbon intensity, and it would make the highest difference of addressing those. So again, over the next 2 years, the One World Living programme is focusing on creating a citywide and bottom-up model of consumption-based emissions reduction. So and that will be achieved through 2 main routes. So A is strengthening council leadership on the circular economy. And that's very much about working with London's boroughs to improve policy, operations, and understanding of what circular economy actually is. And then using this leadership to strengthen Londoners' engagement and understanding of circular economy so that they can use that in their own lives. So again, we highlighted the polling that Zach referred to again, and Londoners do want to make changes to their lifestyle. They understand the connection between what they're consuming and the emissions, but sometimes they're just not quite sure what to do. So they need some tools and information to help them make those right choices in the end, and that is something that this programme is trying to address. So that's very much the second thing in terms of becoming a hub to connect not only councils but also community groups, people, industry, knowledge institutions to enable that innovation and to enable that communication with our residents to show them these are some of the ways they can change their lifestyles. Next slide, please. And the 6th programme is building the green economy, and we share this ambition in terms of doubling the size of the green economy by 2030 with the Mayor of London. So it's a Green New Deal, which came together through the Recovery Board, the London Recovery Board, which was stood up during the pandemic. And will now shift into a more partnership board, but the green economy will still play a role for those boards as well, which has been really encouraging. So, but again, the green economy strand here that's led by Hounslow, they're working very much on building an evidence base for boroughs to take action in their own green economy work. And that's being supported again through data. Data is quite a strong strand here. We want to have data-informed decisions. So I'm developing metrics that allow London to collectively track our progress to reach the shared goals, because at the moment we're not quite sure where we are on that journey. And we're probably sometimes we could be further along than we think. And also it's talking about evaluating some pilots that have happened already, particularly with the mayoral academies, for example, to see how, again, the scaling up, how can we scale that up? How can we deliver those faster? And how can we make sure we deliver the skills that we need in the future? Next slide, please. So last but not least, our 7th programme is creating a resilient and green London, which is all about adapting to some of the change that is already baked into the system, as I mentioned beforehand, and it's got the aim that London should be environmentally, socially, and economically resilient to the changing climate in a way that safeguards and enhances green and blue infrastructure and ensures that they are equally accessible to all. So very important that this is a just transition to all of this as well. So this programme is still working a bit on a vision for climate resilient London, because that's quite a big deal to achieve a vision that all of the partners can buy into. And it's looking also to strengthen local government's adaptation capacity, because that is quite low in many, certainly in many boroughs. And we're finding it, we're working quite a lot on flooding, given the recent incidents last year of the significant floods, and the capacity in boroughs is quite low to address some of these. So that's what we are looking at in those programs as well. And Southwark is our lead borough for that. Next slide, please. Yeah, so how can climate programs really help your boroughs? And it's very much, we are hoping to improve the way we talk about the programs and how much we talk about the programs, and ensuring that all boroughs can learn from what is happening within them. I said already that most boroughs are involved in some shape or form in one or more of the programs. And we just need to become a bit better to make sure that all of that information trickles through. But we're looking at that. And as I said, for example, in the One World Living programme, we've had those 4 strands with food, clothing, and aviation, and I've forgotten the 4th one now, but they have different lead boroughs for each of those, who again put together a sort of a small steering group for them. So there's lots of things that you can get involved in. You can take ideas to implement into your own area action plan. So as Zach was mentioning, all London local authorities have said they're going to develop a climate action plan in some shape or form, and you can take some of those ideas for that. And the program should help with a strategic sort of delivery of those action plans as well, and it will help, as it said on the slide, on our collective journey to net zero and resilience. I think that's me. Emma, is that right? Zach? Next slide, please. Yes.
Yeah. So on top of the programme work that Katerina has just outlined, London Councils is also delivering advocacy activities to influence government policy and strategies, as well as reports coming out of Parliament. So we work to advocate for the best enabling environment possible for you and the boroughs to take forward action on net zero and climate adaptation, as well as your environmental services. So, for example, in the build-up to COP26, we co-organised with the Mayor of London and other GLA colleagues the London Climate Summit to showcase the role of London's local and regional government. At that COP, we also showcased, together with the core cities and Connect Places Catapult, our work on bringing private finance into net zero through 3CI. We've also been very active in responding to key government and parliamentary consultations, for example, the Environment Audit Committee's inquiry into net zero and other select committee inquiries. And we also talk extensively with colleagues at the GLA to help ensure that the work that they deliver helps the boroughs deliver. And we undertake work like the climate polling, which we've all mentioned, and other reactive media work that helps make the case for the boroughs to be able to tackle climate change. Back to you, Katerina.
Next slide, please. So yes, how to get involved. So we give 6 monthly updates to the Transport and Environment Committee. We've got all of the action plans that the London boroughs are putting together on our website, and we do some analysis in terms of, you know, how many actions are there in certain spheres. So how many actions are supporting the low carbon transport program, for example. So we're doing some analysis on that, quite high level, but we're doing some. And we're very happy to also discuss this in a one-to-one with your borough. But I think the first thing for people to do is probably check in with your relevant officer, your relevant portfolio holder, and then also come to us, you know, myself, Zach, or Hannah, who's the program director for the programs, and we'll be glad to help you. Is there another slide? Next slide. Question slide. So I can't see many questions yet, so I can't believe there aren't any.
Well, just
Sorry,
to
over
thank
to you,
you
Sven.
and yeah, just to thank you and Zach for the presentations. It's really important to highlight Hannah's work as the program manager. That's one of the new investments we've made over the last year to make sure that we can coordinate the thematic groups. I can't see the questions, so they've been sort of fed to me via WhatsApp, but please do put them in the Q&A function in the webinar. And if not, I might start as chair asking some questions of my own. So please do come in. So while people come up with questions, I suppose one of the things is the slide about how the updates take place at Tech, the 6 monthly updates. That's a public meeting in a sense. It's a recorded meeting. So if you're really interested in this work, do track the Transport and Environment Committee's work on London Council's website. You can watch the meetings. You'll see the papers and updates. Every meeting, though, I produce a chair's report which captures what we've been doing between Transport and Environment Committee meetings. And there's a whole section on our climate change work, which picks up the advocacy elements, as well as the programme delivery work and our discussions with government. I wonder if Zach and Catherine, I think both mentioned 3CI. I wonder if either of you just want to unpack that very briefly. I can obviously talk about it as well, but rather than hearing from me. Because that's crucial, I think, in some of our advocacy work, but also how we're working with cities outside London, the City of London around green finance, and thinking about how we fund all of that retrofit work that's obviously award-winning, but we want to unlock. And then I'll go back to questions from those watching.
Thanks very much, Mayor Glanville. So in terms of the 3CI work, yes, as you mentioned, we started that work really a year and a bit ago. It's probably, no, it's longer now, a year and a half ago now. And it's very much, it was an initiative jointly by the Connected Places Catapult, Core Cities and ourselves. And it's all about that problem, how do we finance net zero? Because yes, as you mentioned, retrofit alone has got huge amounts of costs attached to it, but so have some of the other programs. And in terms of the climate action plans that have been developed by local authorities, a lot of the issues arising with those climate action plans is local authorities don't know how to finance the activities that are required in those action plans. So we've been thinking about how creatively, how do we get money into the system? So we know the public sector will not be able to fund all of what we require, and we need private sector investment into this policy, and quite significant private sector investment. So we've been, as we said, we've been working with those other local authorities, and we've now opened it up to all local authorities in the country, and we've come up with a sort of place-based approach which subsidizes revenue generating investment subsidizes some of those investment that doesn't generate any revenue. And that's the idea behind it, because there's, for example, on the solar panels on roofs or EV infrastructure, there is a return on investment, and it's quite intuitive. We all know what that sort of business case looks like. But when you want to retrofit sustainable urban drainage into your community or green your community, there's no financial return on investment as such. There are improved outcomes, possibly in terms of health. You know, you have to reduce some of the cleanup rates, possibly you have less flooding, hopefully, but there's no necessary financial incentive. So it's thinking about how we work in a place, how we make the finances work, but also how do we get all of those additional outcomes as well. And we've got to a point where we've got a business plan, business case now developed, and we're working very closely with government on that. And we're now looking to put some demonstrators together in the near future to demonstrate the proof of concept and make sure that the figures that we've put into the business case stack up as well.
Thanks a lot, Katerina. So we've got a couple of questions. I think one's very easy to answer. Will we be sharing the slides? Yes. There will also be a recording of the webinar and some links to some of the key locations for this information that are regularly updated on the London Council's website. You'll see the hashtag behind Katerina and some of us, Be the Solution. That's a good thing to track if you want to save it on Twitter alongside the London Council's account. Almost all of the information coming out of London Council at the moment either advocating around the spending review or climate change. So there's always lots of information there. And Zach did a good thread around some of the polling that was referred to earlier. There's a question about how people can be involved, how members and officers can be involved from Alexandra. And then there is also a question about budget cuts and financial pressure and how we can justify investment given the pressures in things like adult social care. And then there's a question about the low carbon development theme, which is obviously mine in Hackney. And then I'll come back to Councillor Sada, Hashimi, who's got their hand up in a second. So who wants to talk about involvement? I might then start the discussion around budget and then move on to low carbon development, but involvement.
Yeah, I think in terms of involvement, get involved in the programs would be really welcome. So all of the lead boroughs are really happy to have more boroughs working on this. The more people work on this, the less resource intensive it becomes for the lead borough as well. So that would be the main way in. So there are steering groups, and then in the steering groups, people decide what tasks get delegated to different partner organisations. So if there is a borough who would be really keen to take some additional responsibility, there will be ample of opportunity in all of the programmes, because not one lead programme can, one lead borough can deliver all of the ambitions that are in the action plan. So I would recommend having a bit of a look into the action plans and perhaps thinking about, your own climate action plan and how that chimes and where you want to prioritise your actions, and then perhaps get involved in the overarching programme as well. I think that's the main way to get involved.
And just do watch out for information from London councils around some of the participatory events like this as well. So on budget cuts, I would argue that we can't afford not to invest in climate change. If we look at the impact it's starting to have on our city in terms of extreme heat and flooding, we don't know what the winter will bring in terms of extreme cold. That has an impact on adult social care. The most vulnerable that can't afford to heat or cool their homes are most at risk of extreme temperatures, and we don't want to get to a situation where we're having to actively retrofit social care, and that we can't afford to do that to keep those residents safe. And I know in Hackney we started to have those conversations about what vulnerable residents are going to need in terms of support. I do though think there's a broader question maybe for Katerina or Zach about how we're financing this, how we're advocating for government for the resource and the powers to do this work. We've just touched on, I think, with 3CI about how we want to leverage in private and blended finance to make sure you recognise after 12 years of austerity that it's really difficult to fund this work. And I suppose the other bit is mainstreaming it. This isn't just about climate change officers or sustainability officers. This is about how procurement, legal, planning, all of that, those professional disciplines are sort of working on this agenda. Katerina or Zach, and then I'll come back to Richard.
I think I fully agree, and I think, as I touched on a bit, there's such a positive message about investing in climate action around jobs, around better places, that has to be part of our advocacy message and is part of our message.
So an example is the net zero review, for example, that's currently taking place with Chris Skidmore. Sorry, I had to think about the name. And we're looking to influence that, for example, from a London perspective. There are inquiries that are spring up every now and again. We're looking to influence the questions inquiries are looking at, but then also the answers to those inquiries. And those are some of the activities that we do. We sometimes actually also write letters to Secretary of States or other senior members of Parliament in the departments that we are working with, and we're working very close with BEIS on the 3CI work, and they have actually given us the money to develop the business case, and we're hoping that they'll also support us in the demonstrator project.
Great. So the low carbon development work is being led out of Hackney Council's planning service. We're doing it with a network of other boroughs as well. And as I think Katerina said, is looking at how we unlock and support low carbon development through the planning process. Now, there are some overlaps with obviously the retrofit work about having a planning system that is fit for adaptation and retrofit, but it is also looking at how we embed net zero principles in our planning policies, how we look at green infrastructure in our planning policies, and also make them sort of fit for purpose for the new duties under the Environment Act around biodiversity and nature recovery. So there's quite an expansive set of national legislative changes, but also many of us will have been through these journeys. There are also tougher obligations within the existing London plan and an emerging planning policy around heat systems and decarbonising heat. So we've had sort of a decade of communal energy being prioritised through the planning process. And now how do you make those communal energy systems that you're being asked to plug new developments into suitable for the journey to net zero? And that's looking at heat pumps and other technologies. And I know some of the big energy providers are sort of doing that work. The modern methods of construction are in there as well, and the role that they can play. And we're also making sure that I guess that we're linking across, as I said, into those other themes. There are some challenges. Some of the technologies that people are using, like cross laminate timber, sort of post Grenfell, are facing some challenges. And we also know that 17%, I think, of Londoners live in homes in conservation areas, and there's some innovative work happening in Kensington, Chelsea, as well as in Hackney and other places, at looking about how you can have protections for heritage and how you can then still support homeowners and landlords to make that transition around net zero. There is also a bit about corporate estate, and we don't just focus when we're talking about sort of retrofit and net zero on housing. It's also public buildings and commercial buildings and the great estates as well. And we've done some work with the GLA to make sure that we're sort of talking to big property and land sort of interests in London and making sure that we're working with them. And the city have their green skyline work, which I'm quite keen that Hackney sort of includes in our work. I don't know if Katerina or Zach want to sort of update. I'm due, unfortunately, within the next month to get my actual programme update from the team. So I don't have the latest programme update in front of me, I'm afraid.
I think you captured the most important strands of the work. And as you say, there's a strong link with Retrofit London, and the two programmes are now talking to each other and deciding who's taking what bit of some of that planning forward. No, I think you covered most of the things in terms of building consent and all that. That's quite difficult to get in a heritage site. So not more to it. Thanks.
So, Councillor Sadir Hashimi, can we bring them in either on their mic, or are they able to post their comment in chat? Because I know they've been waiting patiently in the background.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I couldn't find where the question and answer was, so I put my hand up. The elephant in the room is public transport. Unless we get that sorted out, we won't be able to get people out of their cars, because currently it's cheaper to use your car than to use public transport. What actions are we taking towards addressing that, please?
So in terms of Transport and Environment Committee, transport is a major part of our work, and actually the core founding of the committee the joint committee is around our sort of transport duties, which include things like taxi card and the Freedom Pass, which we administer. We have a very close relationship with TfL and the GLA, just to provide some context. So we were providing a lot of advocacy around ensuring that London got a transport deal, transport funding deal. So we had conversations with DfT, Baroness Veer, advocating not just for London to have stable funding around public transport, but also that flowing through to boroughs. A significant contribution to the funding we all have for our LIP funding, which is £69 million this financial year and £69 million next, which allows us to look at dangerous junctions, bus prioritisation, investment in active travel flows through that latest funding deal, TfL and back to the boroughs. We've also been very clearly saying to both TfL and the government that that pot has been shrinking while the ask of that pot has been increasing. And I say the ask has been increasing, resident expectations around transport infrastructure are increasing. There is a £500 million deficit around potholes and road maintenance that is probably not £500 million anymore. It's probably more than that, given the challenges of the last couple of years and being able to do some of the capital works. When it comes to advocacy, we move at the pace of consensus. So there are divergent views on things like road user charging, divergent views on things like the ULEZ or the boundary charge. What we do is represent the voice of boroughs being involved in those decisions and co-producing those decisions. We have a real shared interest, and I speak as a London Borough leader from inner London, of ensuring equity for outer London in terms of transport infrastructure and investment. And I think it would be fair to say that the latest funding settlement has within its formula a writing of some of that bias in the funding towards outer London and more investment in active travel. When we talked about bus route changes, while we basically advocated on behalf of boroughs to say, we shouldn't be doing these changes without us. And also we should have an eye to the connectivity in outer London and the infrastructure investment in outer London. I suppose there's two other final pieces of the puzzle, is finding a long-term funding settlement for London that supports affordable public transport, that contributes to net zero reductions and moves people out of the private car. The low carbon transport theme is led by Richmond and Westminster, I think. And that was one of the slides that we saw earlier. But we have a subgroup, a Transport and Environment Committee, that includes a look at long-term funding and also capital need. So as part of the sort of reset after the last local elections, the Environment Board at London Councils is looking at the infrastructure needs of London and collating all of that so that we've got a sort of joint advocacy position about the importance of, while we believe all in levelling up and working with other cities across the UK, we don't want to see a levelling down of London and its infrastructure. So again, providing that investment, advocating alongside the Mayor for that investment, but having that very distinctive borough voice. And I think it also goes to the sort of point that Janice was raising about resources. If we can't maintain our officers that work on transport and active travel and planning our infrastructure, which is supported by that LIP funding, it allows us to do programmes with schools. It allows us to do the work with business around supporting just transition and local transport plans. Then we're not going to see the contribution that transport makes to net zero reduce. I don't know if Katerina or Zach sort of want to expand on what I've said.
I think that was very comprehensive.
She said it's Kingston and Westminster who are leading the transport programme.
As I said it, I knew I was going to get it wrong. Apologies to both Richmond and Kingston. I know Richmond are very keen to be involved, and I think the outer London boroughs are, very hot on advocacy at London councils about making sure that the understanding around those infrastructure needs are there, and also the equity around some of the new modal methods like EV scooters, dockless bike schemes, the Santander scheme, bus routes, transition of bus routes. That has all been part of the lobbying that I've sort of seen and supported from outer London colleagues at Tech. Let's see what other questions have come in. I haven't got any others. There was a sort of return to the theme around investment in climate officers. Part of the reason for having thematic groups is to try and share the load of and the burden of this work, but to anchor it in the boroughs, so that we know that there's immense expertise across London's boroughs in both transport and environment, and sort of unlocking that to collaborate, recognising that resources are finite, and to give those sort of peer networks the power to sort of jointly develop responses, rather than having to develop 32 different responses and the city. And I do think when we look at the impact London's had on EV infrastructure, for instance, the national government funding, the TfL funding and partnership, the working with borough officers has seen some of the best EV infrastructure rollout, I think, anywhere in the country. And the ability to, again, sort of shape the market and influence what comes forward, listen to Londoners, prioritise fast charges where they're needed to support transition of deliveries, business and the taxi fleet, but then also think about long-term residential charging infrastructure. Again, there are case studies from Barnet and from Westminster, from Hackney, from many parts of London that we can sort of share if people are interested about how we sort of work together on that agenda. It's not one of the explicit themes, but it sort of sits more on the transport side of what we do, but obviously contributes to that transition. We've got 4 minutes to go, so I'm conscious that we might be able to squeeze in one last question. If not, I'll return people to 4 minutes of their lunch hour back, and just thank you all for attending, and do watch out for the email that contains both the webinar, the slides, the key links and the contacts, as we said. And if in doubt, do ask your transport or environment lead back at Borough, or get in touch with the officers that you've met today. Thanks very much indeed, and thanks to the London Council officers for making this happen. Great stuff.
Thank you. Bye.